Okay, Mark, here's that video I promised you. Okay, so inside here, I've pulled the distributor cap off right here. And so under the distributor cap, you have the rotor. And I got to thinking, I've had a failure of the rotor before. The rotor, even had a failure of the cap before. So you see this button right in the middle of the cap? That is spring-loaded. Oops, I can't point. There we go. So that is spring-loaded, that little guy right there is. And I have taken a cap off, and that damn spring-loaded assembly be gone. You know, I don't know where it went, but it was gone. So that's a possibility, even on a new cap, that has fallen out, perhaps. I don't know. Like I say, I can't imagine. I'm having trouble imagining what could have happened between when we ran it and when you got it. But anyway, so that's one possibility. I just make sure that you've got that button, because what it does is it rides on the rotor, that rides on it, and of course that's what distributes the spark to the proper cylinder at the proper time. Now the other thing I've seen is this thing get caught inside the distributor cap, and then this thing just get turned at an angle, and instead of straight out. And so of course then it's not firing at the right time. It can't send the spark at the right time, because it might even be between terminals when the spark happens, because this thing's offset to the rear. So that's a possibility. So there's your rotor button. Now you'll see the lobe I was talking about down here. If you look down on this one, of course, it only has 4, because this is a 4-cylinder engine. But that lobe opens and closes the points, and right now the points are open because it's at the top of the lobe, but it opens and closes the points. So, matter of fact, because of there's a spark advance in here, I'll explain why you have to have a spark advance, but you can generally move that and open and close your points. Sometimes you can open and close them when you rotate your distributor a little bit. Okay, so as I mentioned, you've got a wire that comes from your key switch, and it goes to the positive terminal on your coil. And so we should determine that there's truly voltage there. All right, and then as I mentioned, these points open and close. So I'm not going to open and close them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a jumper wire here. Yeah, here we go. I think this one's good. No, that's the bad one. I'm going to get a jumper wire, and I'm going to make the spark happen. I'm going to show you how you can check the coil. You're bypassing the ignition points. All right, so here's the wire from the ignition points, or from your coil. And again, your ignition points is a switch that's downstream of the coil. Now, if I ground this wire right here to this surface, I got a little spark when I grounded it, and I got a little tiny spark when I take it loose. But what also is happening is when I'm doing that, I'm simulating opening and closing the points. And there's my high voltage spark coming from my coil wire. Okay, so this wire right here, I've just got it laid up close to something that's grounded, and so you can see that I'm sparking there. Okay, and I'm just doing it by opening and closing. I'm doing the same thing as the points do when they open and close. So I'm just doing it with a piece of wire. Okay, and so I know my coil's okay, and I know I've got voltage to my coil, so I know all that stuff's working. And if I've still got it, if I still had a problem, I'd know that my spark problem is somewhere in my distributor here, in my points. So I can actually do the same thing if I put my jumper on one side of my points, and I can just close them. Right? I'm closing my points. Closed, open, and I'm getting my spark up here. So that's what happens when the points open and close. Okay, So, so if your points are not adjusted properly, they can be adjusted improperly two ways. And this is about the proper gap, which is about 16, 17 thousandths, might be 22 thousandths. A tool called a feeler gauge is how you set that. In the absence of a feeler gauge, you can use a matchbook cover, but now that we don't smoke anymore, matchbook covers are kind of hard to come by. But at any rate, okay. If the points don't close all the way, then you can never energize your coil. And if you never energize your coil, then you can't de-energize it and create a spark. All right, so if your points are staying closed and they're adjusted to where they're not opening at all, then you don't have, if they don't open, then the magnetic field inside the coil doesn't collapse and it doesn't throw a high voltage spark. So those are the things that can go wrong right there. So I'd start by verifying that you've got voltage when you turn your key on, to actually have voltage on the plus side of your coil. And one thing I really haven't ever experimented with is if my points are closed, what does my voltage read? So I've got points closed. And if I was to read the voltage here at the coil against something that's grounded, I'm not reading volts. Make sure you're reading volts DC. Make sure you're on volts DC has the V in the straight line. Volts AC, which we don't have AC on a boat, but volts AC is with the curvy line. All right, so which is supposed to have a sine wave to depict a sine wave. So now, yeah, so that dropped my volts in half. It dropped me down. I've got a 13 volt or 12 volt battery, so it dropped my volts below half. Now with my points open, I just pulled my, that's what I was using to simulate this is the jumper I was using to simulate my points being closed. With my points open, I should get a full 12 volts or so right here, and I get almost 13 volts because that's how hot the battery is. So if your points are closed, you should end up with, so you have a 6 volt system, so if your points are closed, you should end up with 2 or 3 volts. If your points are open, you should show 6 volts. So let's see. Now the other place that I have experienced problems is in this terminal, that the terminal went to ground. The other place I've had it, there's a little piece of cardboard back here between this thin piece of copper is how the power gets from the terminal to one of your ignition points, one of your points on here. So I have had that ground out against the outside of the distributor. So where it didn't matter if the points were open and closing or not, because that's where my circuit was being made right there. It was just coming from here and going short circuiting, and it didn't matter whether my points were opening and closing. So anyhow, I'm going to get this thing posted, and I'm going to send you a drawing here in just a minute. But anyhow, let me get this sucker posted. All right, later.